think that's a good idea. Just talking? Well, what's the show about? It's about nothing. No story? No, forget the story. You gotta have a story. Who says you gotta have a story?
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Instead, only try to realise the truth. There is no spoon.
There is no spoon.
I'll tell you what it's worth. Not a damn thing. It's a waste of time.
Welcome to Frivolous Fandom. To my right is Kev.
And to my left is Mike.
Let's get into some nerd stuff.
Let's do it. I mean, this is some nerd stuff mixed in with some, like, pop culture stuff that even a girl, like a female, would like. Mike.
Shots fired.
Shots fired at ourselves.
This is honestly, like, we're kind of going into the hipster nerd territory by this, because we're going to be like, well, you know, push up our glasses. I read the Walking Dead comics.
But we do. I have a beautiful compendium right here that is thicker than the Bible of the Walking Dead comic.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
and you know what? I'm a guy that got into the comics after the show. Which is an interesting perspective, I feel, because, I mean, I feel like a lot of people, well, I'm sure the comics have definitely got more popular since the show, but I feel like I talked to a lot of people that were like, oh yeah, I read the comics before the show, and the show is just horrible because it's not word for word, image for image, spitting replica of
it
the
sounded
comic.
a lot like Song of Ice and Fire fans, which,
Right.
Digress.
Which, granted, the show has made a lot of errors, but it's actually done some things better than the comics, believe it or not. I'm here to tell you.
Well, it's a different medium. Like,
Right.
we were discussing earlier, you can't have the organic slice of life, slow, sloggy feel of the comics in a TV show because you will get bored to tears.
Right.
I mean, what's the biggest complaint now? It's moving too slow.
Right.
Well, you can't have your cake and eat it
Right.
too.
How many times do we see him eating green beans in, like, a random living room, like, mulling things over in the comics? Like, every 20 pages or so, you end up with them sitting in a room and, like, except, like Glenn and Maggie go off to their room, Rick and Carl go off to their room, and, like, then you just see, like, 10 more pages of them, like, trying to deal with what's happened.
Well, that's the thing. Ask any guy who's been to war and been in a situation where, you know, like like a World War II situation where you're stuck. You have to sit here and think.
You have to.
They're terrible.
Right.
It stinks. So that's the part that the show can't really do, and that the comics get to. So you do get to know the characters. But
Right.
so as you've probably gathered, the topic for tonight will be Walking Dead.
Walking Dead, where the dead rise to walk.
And eat your face.
And eat your jugular and or face and or any part of you, because apparently zombies, not that picky of eaters, Mike.
Nope. Horses.
Squirrels.
They don't like cow pies, though. They draw the line at cow pies.
They'd have to draw it somewhere. There's not much nutrients in a cow pie. Apparently, I don't know how a zombie can differentiate the nutritional balance of their meal, but they can.
Yeah,
They clearly can.
Depending on the person, you may get more fiber.
Right. So one thing though we'll start talking about, and a good reason we wanted to bring up Walking Dead is because, as most people know, season finale was this past Sunday. We're about to get our Game of Thrones fully torqued up this week, so we got it. This is the time because we're about to be going into like that mindset. So we want to cover our Walking Dead bases right now before we move on, while it's still somewhat relevant, and go from there. So where we're coming from is a position where like I said, I got into Walking Dead from the show. So, and I loved the first two seasons of The Walking Dead. I mean, I know people that dislike season 2 because it was slow, but honestly, a lot of good characterization happened in season 2, especially for Rick, that they then undid with their own work.
I got, my situation was kind of weird because I saw the first episode freshman year, which was what, 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, good.
In the dorm. God, I feel old. I watched it in my dorm with everybody on my floor, and then, and no kidding, I went into my room the next day because it was a Friday night when I watched it, and then I downloaded bought all of the Walking Dead comics.
Right.
Actually, I didn't really download them; they were posted online.
So the sin is not yours.
Yeah, technically, I didn't break the law.
It's good, Mike. It's good that you can always point the finger elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's key number one if you're going to break a law. Just be ready to point the finger.
Well, on that being said, I ended up buying one, chunk at a time, and then selling that chunk. So, I did end up supporting the cause, kind of. Not really, actually.
Right.
I just spent money at the comic store. But,
yeah, who knows who saw that money?
yeah, so, I then... Before in a way, my introduction was the show, but I got caught up with the comics before the show had to,
Right.
Because, as Kev can attest, I can't not explore every story I like to the end right now. Cannot wait. There's
Here, so right now, while we're addressing spoilers...
Since we're going there!
Yeah, Mike is terrible. We started an anime not too long ago called Attack on Titan, and, the next day he was like... Oh man, it gets so crazy. I'm like, wait, what do you mean? We've watched all the episodes. He's like, oh yeah, I kind of read about 40 issues of the manga, and just trust me, bro. I'm like, dude, I don't care. I don't want to hear it.
To be fair, I didn't spoil anything from Titan.
No, you did, but it's all good.
What did I do?
That's
What
a
did I
different
spoil?
podcast.
What did I spoil?
What Mike has spoiled?
Oh boy.
Okay, spoilers if you're an Attack on Titan fan. You told me that Eren becomes a Titan before that ever happened. Anyways, sorry, different podcast.
I don't have a
Our
response
salty
to that.
cast was last week, Mike. We're gonna stay positive. So basically, spoiler alert. If you are a fan of the TV show and you're not current with the TV show, turn this off.
Stop.
Go watch the TV show.
Listen to the Vader cast again or something.
Yeah. Do something better than trying to listen to our podcasts a second time. And then come back when you've caught up on The Walking Dead.
I like it. You're assuming they've listened to the Vader one.
Yeah,
already.
right. Whew, yeah. Now, if you are a fan of the comics and you are not current on the comics, stop listening right now.
Which doesn't seem likely.
It's probably not likely if you are a comics fan, or a fan of Walking Dead comics. You probably are current. But just in case, putting that out there, go get current with comics, then come back.
Thou hast been warned.
If you are current on the show and don't read the comics, listen. This is a lot for you.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's our fair warning. Go away, come back, and then here we are. You just got back. Welcome back to Frivolous Fandom with Mike and Kev. We're talking about how terrible the show got for a little while. Towards the end of probably the last 3-4 episodes of season 3, and then everything that ever happened with
Brian.
It's
always Brian.
Everyone has that one friend in the zombie apocalypse.
Who knew we were going to make a Dane Cook reference?
Right, seriously.
If only they had done what Family Guy had done for an episode.
Karen is always a douchebag. Yet she's always around.
Well, I was actually saying, Family Guy killed off Brian for a little bit. Why couldn't the show have done it?
Right. Well, they did kill him off for about 4 episodes. And then, of course, they brought him back. So,
I patched Jesus.
If, towards the end of season 3, it built up this huge climax. Then they didn't have the battle because Rick was good guy Rick. And then the governor just mows down all his people and wanders off into the sunset with Martinez and the black dude who... Do you ever see that black dude again?
I think it's safe to assume what happened.
I mean, he's in a horror setting, so you know he died.
Well, okay, not only that, he's in a horror setting with a southern gentleman who just had no problem mowing down.
Yeah, I don't understand why that
Poor
whole
guy.
part made no sense. I don't understand why Martinez and that guy didn't just shoot him. The second he starts open firing on people, like as Martinez, and you've just seen his whole plan backfire, you gotta understand his grasp is kind of weakening here. Like, his leadership is...
I've thrown this out there several times to everybody who's been willing to listen. I don't think Martinez lets him out of the hole. There's no way. There's no way. I've watched you kill
no,
dozens.
Yeah, that was dumb. And then in season 4, part 1, of course it was in season 4, part 1. It had to be if it was this dumb. Martinez, lets him back into the camp and then drinks around him.
No, here's the thing.
Lowers his guard around him.
In that situation, I'm like, hand me the kid. He hands me the kid. I kick him deeper. I kick him towards towards a zombie, hoping the thing comes back. And then when my guy's like, what the heck? He's like, trust me, kill him.
No,
now.
That's when you just shoot him on sight and then tell the people, trust me.
No. Oh, yeah, true. But that's the thing. I'm assuming he's holding the girl and he's not taking it out on the girl.
Fair enough.
Now, granted, there's no predicting what Tara would have done in that situation, because Tara did have a weapon at this point, right? She had that pistol.
I don't know. But the point is, Mike, so we can keep this thing, we're trying to stay out of gripe territory, but we gotta gripe real quick. Point being, bringing the governor back, and that was totally not comics. Everything that happened there was not made up by the show writers.
That was bad improv.
And it literally brought the show to crashing halt. It got it stuck in a tar molasses mixture.
Momentum killer. It lost focus. It lost any semblance of logic.
Right, because the whole, like we're saying, with Walking Dead, the premise makes no sense. Like, zombies don't make sense, but where the fun of it is, apply real logic in terms of how people would cope with it in this ridiculous circumstance. Oh, yeah. But when the people's reactions and the way they cope with things becomes ridiculous, then it's just stupid. Like, I don't have the patience for that anymore.
And then I'm about to shoot some shots of my own. Then it turns into Resident Evil.
Right.
It does. It does, lower itself to that level. But that being said, the second half
of season 4,
much better. Much better.
Much better.
And honestly, to me, it redeemed itself. Some of my friends disagree.
Right. It redeemed itself because if I was showing this show to somebody and then they didn't like the end of season 3, I would feel 100% comfortable not mentioning season 4 part 1.
It didn't happen.
Being like, season 4 was really short. They only did 8 episodes. It was so they could focus on season 5, but just trust me, it gets back on track.
And it's weird, there's this time skip and you don't know what happened. But the prison...
Dude, you wouldn't even be able to tell. The only thing you'd be able to tell is you're like, wait.
Well, but there's no prison anymore. I mean,
that's true.
I mean, and Herschel's no longer there.
We'll just be like, you didn't see all this go down in the
spoilers,
finale?
right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Spoilers. Yeah, and that was the other dumb thing. Like, they tried referencing the comics with Herschel getting his head cut off, but in the comics it was Tyrese.
Yeah, it was a really... I mean... But that... I mean, you gotta give the show credit for ad-libbing Herschel's role.
Right.
From then on, because he kind of got to be Dale, in a way.
But still, I loved that they did so much work towards Herschel's development.
Oh, and they just
killed him.
They just take it from you.
And they tried to reference it in the recent finale where Rick is having flashbacks to Herschel because they're trying to allude to the fact that Herschel helped bring Rick back. But I didn't feel it worked quite like they intended for it.
I think had they cut it down to one flashback.
Right, yeah, maybe that was what they kept showing it. You're right, because if they did it once, it's kind of powerful, but by the time it's the third flashback, you're like, okay, they're really trying to sell us that Herschel dying was an important moment in the show.
Yeah, well, and honestly, like, the only reason why it was pertinent, other than the fact that they probably are trying to squeeze more screen time for the actor, okay, fair enough.
Right.
The reason they want to do that is they wanted to highlight Rick's...
Let's be honest, this might be the actor who plays Herschel's last role.
Possibly. And that's the thing.
I mean, he's no spring chicken.
No. And they're highlighting Rick's fear of regression.
Right.
But what I think has kind of happened is Rick is starting to accept that he has to cultivate two separate personas for this world. He needs to keep the caged beast fed.
Right.
He does. He has to. Otherwise, he might catch himself in another situation. But he needs to be able to slip back and forth, which any soldier, any person who's had the misfortune of having to fight in a war, or a police officer from a really nasty part of town will tell you that's not easy and or doable sometimes. So it's going to add a really cool layer of depth to Rick. And we'll get to why it's really important that they handle him in a certain way because of that. But we'll get to that.
So with season 4 part 2, one thing, they did slow it down. They went a little bit more slice of life, just like the comic, which I heard so many people complaining, but maybe it's Mike because, we'd watch it Sunday night and we're like, oh, that was really good. I'd go to work on Monday and people were like, it was so boring. And then maybe it's because we read the comics, so we have the sensibility for that.
Don't go on the forums. Oh my God.
Right.
Then again, that's a good standard.
But then again, people thought the season 4 part 1 finale was good, so they're just dumb. No, I'm just kidding. Let's not say that. Let's not alienate everybody. Whether you can like season 4 part 1, I just didn't.
No, you can't. I don't. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna get these 3 out of the way. Katanas don't do that. There's no way in hell any of those people would have just gone along with the governor. And on top of
that's
that,
a good point.
There's no way in hell Rick doesn't shoot the governor. Okay, I'm done.
Here's what we will say about the reason that it didn't make sense. If they had done the prison raid full blown at the end of season 3, I buy those people following the governor because they were his Woodbury people that had been following him all along.
Yes,
so it makes sense, and that was the way it was in the comics because the governor, he was a little bit.
And what about Tank Wanker?
No, I don't know where you're going with that. Let me just keep going with this before I forget. So they made sense in the comics because the governor has never shown any weaknesses, really. I mean, he's always made the right calls. Woodbury's a nice place and all that. Like, people love him. Why wouldn't they go along with him? Then, in the show, when they bring him back in season 4 with a new crew, where their 2 foremost leaders just upped and vanished 2 days after he showed up.
Mysteriously. Yeah. Coincidentally. And actually, not even. That's what I mean about Tank Wanker.
And then he's like, we need to go fight now. It's like, who doesn't put that together? Okay, 2 main leaders, kill.
Well, how about the tank operator? He knows.
You're right.
He knows.
All he has to do is tell the people, this guy killed my brother.
Yeah.
And Martinez, and nobody follows. Okay, so, yeah. So then, that's my problem with the season 4 part 1 finale. Is then they cheated everybody on that battle for the end of season 3. They're like, okay, I get, that's nice of them to want to give us that. But it just, all feasibility and, like, logic
Better to
vanished.
just cut your losses.
Yeah, exactly. They should just cut their losses, but they had to get him out of the prison. It just wasn't good. So I guess really we could blame season 3 part 1 on the end of season four part 1 on the end of season 3. Because if they had just done the full battle, and if season 4 part 2 had been season 4 part 1, I would be a happy camper.
Well, because then we go from that emotional adrenaline rush to, okay, we need time to recuperate. And that would have been perfect. So I guess where we're going to be able to segue into the meat of what we're going to talk about tonight is there's some really good material left in the comics that can be plucked, adapted. I mean, granted, because we'll get
a lot of characters are shuffled. So.
Shuffled, gone, doesn't exist. New, like, people taking the new roles. But there's some really good parts that could come from it. But there's, and we'll throw you some examples of things that they adapted really well.
Right, yeah. Season 4, part 2, like, the slower slice-of-life approach was more comics, but there was some moments that were directly taken from the comic, and I really think... But they're still doing their own thing with it, and that's why I really enjoyed Season 4, part 2, because they were successfully doing what they started out doing, which was taking some of the best moments from the comics and blending it with sort of their own tale that fits TV more.
The first one, ironically, the first one we have is not actually from the good portion. It's something subtle that I picked up on at the end of the hated episode.
Right.
So in the comics, we all remember Lily killing the governor.
I actually didn't remember Lily, so you should summarize who Lily is just in case.
Lily is a ranking member, militia woman. I don't know what the term you'd use in Woodbury, who. Basically is she's responsible for commanding a wing of the offensive attacking the prison. Right. She's actually the one, I think, who shoots the
she does. She shoots Lori and the baby.
Yeah. So Lori and Judith go down. She snaps.
Which, yeah, by the way, Judith is gone in the comics. That's a big, vast difference.
Yeah. In a really, I'm glad they didn't actually they show the tank round or the 50 cal round. They don't show
they don't show the impact.
The aftermath. Thank God. But Lily loses it. She just turns to the governor and says, "You blankety blank! I can't believe you made me do that," and then kills it.
Right.
This character gets split up, and she has a relatively small role building up to that point. Like she's a secondary, tertiary character bobbing, but she gets split up into 2 different people in the TV series. One of them named Lily.
Right.
Brian's new squeeze. And Tara, Lily's sister. So, the aspects, the descent for the kind of, cause like, if you think about it, the governor is a really good allegory for a Hitler character. Someone who rallies everybody with illusions of grandeur and perfection. Kind of the cult hero. but one who only bases it off of success. And so when that starts to crumble, you start to get the veil lifted, and you start to actually see them for what they are and what they're doing.
Right.
And in this case, Tara, she doesn't react violently. She cloisters up. Her conscience won't let her fight. She's not scared of dying. She's scared of doing the wrong thing. And she freezes. Now, that could be considered cowardice. I actually find that kind of... That means her character was enough to where it would even factor in.
Right.
And then we have the fact that Lily in the series actually kills Brian.
Well, let's say, when you put it that way, because I don't like Tara that much, and you do, so we'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
But it's good, yeah. The way, when you put it that way, she sounds a little bit more likable.
Was it? This is going to sound cliche. Like is a super strong word. I'm intrigued.
Fair enough, yeah.
I think there's potential.
Right.
They've made a
And
couple...
I'll admit, yeah, and I see where you're going with it.
There's specific right plays they've made with her. They made a couple awkward ones, and that's the thing. How she interacts with the group from here on out will greatly determine that. But we'll get to that.
Well, so then so in the comics, it sort of is like, Lily's like, you just made me kill an infant child. Boom, done. Whereas in the show, they had Michonne hunting for the governor and thing, and just because they kind of had to, they never really justified why Michonne was still looking for the governor. Or maybe did she say?
No, she's like, this is for Andrea. I'm getting.
Okay, fair enough. That's kind of weak in my opinion. Just because they didn't sell the Andrea and her relationship enough.
I think,
but that's because Andrea was a horrible character in the show.
Well, she explained it to Carl later. It's like, Andrea brought me back.
Right, fair enough. I guess we'll say is because she had a duty to Andrea, not as much as they clicked as two people. Because Andrea was horrible in the show.
I honestly, that's, okay, we cannot go down that hole.
So fair enough. She was doing her duty. Okay, she was doing her duty to Andrea. Andrea brought her back, and then she stabbed the governor for Andrea, and kept searching. She wanted to make sure the governor was dead for Andrea, I guess. Sure, I'll run with it. Okay, fair enough. So in the show, Michonne stabs the governor through the chest, and then leaves because she's gonna let him
I'm gonna
suffer.
let you turn.
Right.
Oh man.
And that sort of had to happen. That was a crowd please. That was some fan service. Of course, Michonne had to stab the governor. But in the show, it is still Lily who, in the end, puts the bullet in the governor's head and calls it a day.
Yeah, and ironically, we don't know what happens to her afterwards.
You know what?
She's toast.
That's true. Yeah, I was gonna say she's toast. I think that was just sort of to point to this is her last act of good that she does.
Well, because now her daughter died partially in fault of Brian. So bang, done.
Right.
So that's the first thing that kind of, and it's ironic that they split it into two characters and a salvageable character.
Right. They salvaged one, which is cool because now they're running with a cool character in the show that they're not with, that they ended right there with the comics. Because similar to the Lily in the show, you never see Lily in the comic again. Yeah. But Lily is sort of living on in Tara. Yeah. It's weird. And it's kind of cool, though. That's one of the things in the show that they do. They take things in interesting directions at times. Yeah, right. Well, and then actually that comes to our next part that I think they nailed relatively well. Because granted, we hated watching it and we wanted to wring this little... Yeah, they didn't sell it in the show as well as the comic, but it is from the comic. But, and honestly, it's one of those things where it's like Cersei from Game of Thrones, where you gotta give... Or Joffrey, you gotta give that little guy credit. He makes you hate the character. Right. And I think, unintentionally, they're making us hate Carl. I don't think they want us to hate Carl. No, see, I think they wanted you to hate Carl for a while, and now that they're trying to make you like him, they're not selling it right. You're like, you're not being this like, I'm trying to assert myself. No, you're just being a stupid little brat. Right. Yeah. The way he carries himself is like so arrogant. Like, that's the thing in the comic. Carl is what are you gonna do? Carl is never arrogant with it. No. Okay, so the part we're referring to is, it might have even been the first episode. It was earlier on in the second half of season 4. I think it was second episode in the second half. I hate you, AMC, by the way, because it gets confusing specifying which half of a season you're referring to. Yeah. But in the second half of season 4, shortly after the prison, and they're all of the Walking Dead survivors are scattered. There's little pockets, you have everybody. But right now it's just Rick and Carl. Rick is still suffering from the battle at the prison, though, and he still has his wounds. He's beat to hell. Yeah, he's limping along, to say the least. God, that stupid little brat is just like... and Rick passes out because he takes a couple aspirins because that helps broken ribs and aspirin.
Hey, I mean,
solves all.
it's not gonna hurt.
Right, yeah. It couldn't make anything worse. And he passes out, and which is directly from the comics, and it's just Rick and Carl, and so now Carl's sitting there.
Well, that or the adrenaline just wore off.
Right, yeah. He probably was ready to pass out for hours. And so when Rick doesn't wake up, though, in like a reasonable amount of time, Carl's just sort of left to sit there with his thoughts and his fears of like, A, is my dad going to make it? If he doesn't make it, B, how am I going to survive?
Which you gotta wonder, though, how much of that bravado BS was a, albeit very misguided and foolish attempt, but an attempt to build a defense mechanism.
Right.
Fine, I don't need you.
Right.
Even if, it's completely bonkers and bollocks, but...
Well, okay, so, yeah, there's some bravado there, and in the comic there was bravado. He goes, I don't need you, Dad, but they add a scene in the show where Carl goes to look, oh, now I'm blanking. Why does he leave again? He goes to look for supplies or something.
He's looking for food. He wants...
That might happen in the comic. Does he go he goes and looks for supplies, doesn't he?
He looks for something. There's something specific.
Sorry, there's a lot of comics to cover. So
Yeah.
we know what happens.
I haven't read these. If I get something wrong, it's because I haven't
yeah.
actually read these in like 3
But
years.
long story short, in the show, he goes look for supplies or something of the like, and he is an idiot, and he's toying with these zombies, and he bumps into one in a house, and he loses his shoe. And when he walks outside, he writes a note on the door that says something to the effect of like, lost shoe, ... but the zombie didn't get me.
Yeah,
And you're just like, Carl, you're proving,
childish.
you're having to prove yourself to nobody. Like, nobody's going to read that message, and if they do, they're not going to care what happened to you.
In fact, I can honestly say that I might be so worried about my surroundings in the sense of looking for a walker. Or a crawler.
Right.
Or worse, a crawler.
Oh, you know what?
That I might not even read the damn message.
Right. You know what was a more grievous offense? Actually, it was then later he's leading these walkers around, and he trips. Remember that? And then the walkers fall on him.
Magically, he's
And
able to lift off. Yeah.
magically kills them, and then goes, ha! I win. And I'm like, Carl, you should reflect on the fact that your arrogance almost got you killed instead of being more arrogant. Like, that's not a defense mechanism at that point. Like,
No, at
you
that
could
point-
just learn.
Well,
How about
that's
you learn something, Carl?
That's literally it's a liability, and so
Right.
I think that's well, and we'll get to why that I don't know if Carl's going to have that attitude from
Right,
here on out.
right.
That might change. But
So, I mean, their execution wasn't as good, but overall I do like the scene because, you know, Carl has had this angst towards the end of season 3, and then this is a logical scene where he finally has to sort of air that out. And
Yeah.
that's why I like it.
well, I think I'd be able to. He's still not he's a little twerp, but he's not a large enough twerp
Right.
to do this to his dad while his dad's conscious.
Right. I mean, and they had a couple. They had a couple fun little things, like when he eats I thought it was maybe beans when I first saw it, but he eats
That pudding.
the pudding.
That was
like,
hilarious.
That was funny. And when he tells his dad, he tells Rick, he's like, "I'm not hungry." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I just had 128 ounces of pudding." Like that.
Rick is just like,
That was cool.
I'm
And
sure
him sitting on the roof.
I'm sure Rick is looking at him like, you're gonna have to like use the restroom pretty soon here, buddy.
Right.
That's a lot of sugar right away, but yeah. Well, and then speaking of kids who are not functioning properly,
Right.
yeah. This is, and granted, I'm only going to address this subject with some really dark and black humor, so bear with me. But the way the show went about it, I knew it was coming from a mile away. So I thought they were going to deal with this crap in the prison, and then they didn't.
Right.
And I thought that they might deal with it, you know, right after the breakout. They didn't. They built it up.
That's kind of funny. The prison breakout this prison breakout that nobody wanted. Yeah, that's ironic.
No, take us back.
But yeah, bring us back to the prison. Sorry, that's not where you're going. With
That's
that,
perfect.
That's kind of funny.
So anybody who has read the
Jailbreak! Nobody runs. Everyone's just like looking around, like, why?
we're gonna stay here. But so anybody who's read the comics knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say the twins.
Yeah.
And there's a perfect parallel with siblings, albeit girl siblings and not twins, in
Right.
the TV show with what are their names?
Oh, who cares? The
The
girl
girls,
twins in the
yeah.
show.
So they've been like, I don't know, one of them's obviously whacked out. And granted, to be fair, it would actually be better for you to be younger. I wish I had my child development major sister here to verify this, but shout out to Sarah. If there's a window where you're making specific social and societal attachments and connections in your brain, that the zombie apocalypse would be bad. It would be very bad for you to exist at that
I
region.
feel like it's better to be younger in terms of survival in the zombie apocalypse, like in terms of your perceptions of the world are going to form, where like killing zombies is like just what you do.
Yeah.
But in terms of your acceptance from the old world, and in terms of your acceptance from these people that knew morality and the social norms from civilized world, it's a catch-22, yeah, because you would survive better if you're on your own, or if the world were completely like you, but you saw these lingering populations of older people that aren't, they know better.
Well, how old do you think the oldest sister would have been? I think
she looked to be about 12 or 13.
12, 13. So, literally the time where you're going to find your social role in interactions and really start to make your first permanent relationships.
Right.
Terrible time for everybody to be dropping like flies. And because that's when your empathy starts to get worked.
Right.
That's really not good.
Yeah, and that's why, and she started finding empathy for the zombies.
And it's like, you can't do that. And that's where the real tragedy happens. Is because the younger sister's playing along. And that's what she's doing. She's playing.
Right.
And I think they even verbally said that. She's like, we were pretending like you were. I wasn't.
Right.
And so, and then we have Carol, Mom of the Year, apparently.
Yeah, well, it's funny how, because basically the twins, because the twins were girls in the show. They're boy twins in the comic, but it's also a different point to it, because in the comics it was Dale and Andrea had sort of adopted these two twins.
Yeah.
And so the impact of what happened was felt by them and to develop them, whereas in the show, Carol, who is so different in the show than in the comic,
AKA alive.
AKA breathing, Carol is the one that has sort of adopted these twins and that has taken them on and is sort of emotionally attached to them. So then it's her development when the ish goes down with the twins. So that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, and no doubt, if you know what we're
they
talking
had
about.
similar shades of character development, but it was a lot different for Dale.
Well,
and
it was a
Andrea.
lot more rapid with the actual twins in the comic series as opposed to the siblings, because the twins, it wasn't necessarily...
Oh, that's funny. You're right. I've been calling them twins in the show.
Well, I mean,
they were just siblings.
They're inseparable little sisters, so I mean,
right.
whatever.
Fair enough.
But the difference was that the twins happened on... I mean, the twins were younger.
Yeah.
And they were both... It was not... It literally was a lack of understanding.
They were only like 6 or 7.
Yeah. It was an actual lack of understanding on top of the fact that, he really did think his brother was just going to get up and move again.
Right.
And he didn't connect. So,
Right.
And so, granted, Carl, and just in case you're not, you aren't going to read the comics and are watching the show, Carl kills the twin that killed the twin.
Ooh, that's a good point. That's one aspect of the comics that's superior.
Which is
Carol killing him, I will admit it hit me, so I'm not upset with that. I think that was a good payoff for that storyline in the show.
It's an old Yeller moment, and it had to happen.
It had to happen, but, I mean, come on, Carol's already killed innocent people.
I may have lost humanity points by comparing that girl to a dog, but, whatever.
Are you talking about the movie where the dog plays shoots the basketball into the hoop? Is that the movie you're talking about?
No, Old Yeller. The ranch dog that gets rabies.
That was very kind of... that was a terrible reference. I was trying to reference Rick and Morty, and he's like, it's just like Old Yeller! And then she's like, only because there's a dog in it, honey. I'm like... Let's get away from that.
Fair enough. But I'm like, okay, I'm looking at you like I don't...
Mike, if you didn't get that was a terrible attempt, but...
Okay, I was concerned for a second that you didn't know what Old Yeller was.
Oh, yeah,
like,
no, I know what Old
I'm pretty
Yeller
sure
is.
you were in the same class as me when we watched it.
I know what Old Yeller is. But if you didn't get the reference, there's no way these people got the reference. So let's move on. So yeah, the Carol payoff, I was fine with it. It wasn't my favorite. Whereas in the comic, you were like, what? Because Carl, basically in the comic, the twin kills his brother, and Dale finds out and alerts the group. And Dale's everyone's freaking out, but Dale especially because he's the adoptive father. And somebody in the group's like, maybe we should just kill him. And then,
Well, of course,
and then-
Dale does not like that
Right.
plan at all.
Which, as much as I don't agree with killing the children, at the same time, you're like, this kid is his psychological development. He's literally lost at this point, nearly. He might come back, but there's a higher probability that he's going to kill someone else or cause trouble before.
It's going to be a dice roll.
Right.
And honestly, you have to factor that in because now he's not trustworthy around other children.
Right.
You're going to have to give an adult, an able-bodied adult who could be doing another task,
Right.
The task of babysitting this kid. Always.
Right.
Probably even at night.
And,
So
yeah, and it's like, Dale, I know you think you could do that always, but you're an old man. Like,
apparently you weren't able to. I mean,
Right.
woe betide the man who has the stupidity to tell that to him to his face, but
which
is why Carl does what he does. Carl's like,
exactly,
I'm taking,
yeah. So the adults are kind of at an indecision because, at that point they don't want to do anything that everyone won't agree with, and Andrew and Dale are adamant. They're like, we can't do this. So Carl's like, okay, I'm going to take it upon myself to do this. And granted, this is after a lot of other stuff, so this isn't like Carl just randomly. I mean, he shot Shane for Pete's sake.
well, and that's the thing. This was after his head issues, right? Or this is prior? Yeah.
Issues?
Yeah.
No, this is prior.
This is prior. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, but Carl basically says, look, I'm just going to take it upon myself. He shoots the twin.
Yeah.
And just so it's over with, because even Carl understands, he's like,
It's a foregone conclusion.
it's a foregone conclusion that something's going to happen. It might not.
and
it
it's
might
actually,
not,
it's
but
actually a service to Dale. It is.
right.
In a really...
Because then Dale can move on. As messed up as that is, this whole world is messed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dale can finally move on, and the group can move on, because the group's at an impasse. So that was just kind of like a WTF moment, but at the same time, it won you some respect for Carl in a way. Like, it's like skeptical, because you're like, okay, he might be nuts himself.
Your eyebrow is raised. You are not quite you are intrigued. You do not
Right.
have my attention yet.
Right. And it's not, it's not forced.
I was like waiting for the reaction.
No, that was good. It's not forced, like, you have my curiosity. It's not forced like the show's Carl. The show's Carl, they try to force it a lot. Whereas, like, in the comic, I'm genuinely, like, intrigued by Carl. I'm like, wow, what is this kid capable of?
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, that was a good episode. Me and you both were like, wow, that was a really good episode. It made me enjoy the Carol Tyrese plot that I wasn't really caring for.
First time I've actually, like, not wanted Carol to die.
Right. Yeah, right. And
a
it taught
while.
Carol into confronting Tyrese, which had to happen. So it was a really good way of using that plot from the comics that
It tied some loose ends that needed to be knotted.
Right. Exactly.
Which, and speaking of cords and knots,
And loose ends.
oh god, so everyone will know what we mean when I say jugular chomp.
He's taking a bite out of rapists.
Oh, one bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Only one
man.
bite was necessary.
Right? It's like
Ooh.
he did
I
the
cheered.
job.
Kevin was in the room with me. I jumped up and went, hell yeah! I was
Right?
just like, dude, you rip his throat out. I'm sure had anyone who knows me from my family had been in there, that would have been awkward. But
You're right. You savor his gillet.
to save my
Right.
reputation, context!
Right.
Context to the statement.
You suck on those giblets, Rick. You deserve those giblets.
Okay, so the reason why we're happy that our main character bit somebody's throat in a very bloody and messy way is because the dude was helping facilitate not one, but two rapes. And a jumping.
Right.
We're of course referring to the pack of, I don't know, raiders is probably the best way we can describe them. But,
Yeah. Let's call them raiders.
yeah. The group that
They weren't
Daryl-
wearing bags on their head, but they were raiders.
It's a raid! I think he had like a KKK vest
He
thing going on
probably
there,
did.
but
He's probably Aryan Brotherhood or something.
at some point, that's why I got along with Daryl. But yeah, so Daryl shacked up with them for a bit, and then they come upon them. And the whole time, Beardo Silverback has been telling Daryl, we're after this one monster who killed our friend, ignoring the fact that clearly one of their own people was dead. Like, they totally forgot about the other person who was strangled in the, whatever.
Right.
But they're like, okay, we gotta find this guy.
Yeah.
And so,
And you know what though? They probably thought Rick did that.
No,
They would have mentioned it. They
Yeah.
would have been like, he killed two of our men.
our
Yeah,
people.
they know,
No.
you're right.
So then again, one of them might have said, "Hey, I claimed it," and he just like even though he's the one. Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
So they're like, "Oh, this guy killed like Craig or something."
Yeah.
And then Daryl's like, "Yeah." Daryl's like,
My best friend, Jeff.
"These are good people. If you want to kill somebody,
I
kill
claimed him as my best friend.
and you killed him. You choked him out in a
He took him
bathroom."
from me.
And so, you know, then...
How did best friends go? Like, that must create some divisions in that group.
Oh, man.
Like, everyone's got, like, claimed! You can't be his friend, I'm his friend.
I can only... okay. We're not going to follow that. We'll let that...
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I wasn't going anywhere with
But
that.
so, and that actually, there's a part very, very similar, in the comics.
So yeah, okay, so in the show, it's, they're hunting for Rick because he killed one of their men. But in the comic, it's a lot more random, I want to say.
Yeah. It's a flashpoint. Like anybody's MMO, it's like, oh god.
Now, what happens is, this is shortly after Rick kind of meets up with Abraham, who you guys should know from the show, who is more or less the same, but a lot of the details are
He's a little tubbier.
But yeah, the details are varied, namely his muscle ratio. But it's still the same plot in the comics. Abraham is with this genius pushing onwards to DC where they can get in contact with someone where he can relay his solution to the zombie apocalypse, or the zombie virus. That's still Abraham in the comics. Instead of meeting up with Glenn or Maggie or anything like that, though, they meet up with Rick first. And naturally, as always happens, he doesn't like Rick very much.
Yeah.
Because good guy Rick is too good, and nobody likes a goody two-shoes.
Until you need him to save... Yeah,
until you need him to save the day, precisely. So, but Abraham, he doesn't quite like Rick. He sees that Rick is capable and all that, and is, respecting him in that manner, but he would do without Rick if he could. And so, at one point, they need to go for supplies. I don't remember if they ran out of gas. I don't remember exactly, but they have to go for supplies. And so Abraham's tells the group, look, me and Rick are going to get supplies. It'll be 2 days. He knows of this police station. It's it's a good bet. That's why we're doing it. And so Michonne's like, I want to go. And then Rick's like, no, you need to stay here and protect these people. But he says, look, Carl, gotta come with me. Because Carl doesn't know any of these other people yet, really. I mean, he kind of knows Michonne a little, but he doesn't really know anybody. And Rick, they just narrowly escaped the prison together, and they're the only family have. So Rick goes, Carl's coming with me. End of story. So Rick, Carl, and Abraham.
And Abraham's not even really,
Abraham doesn't argue it.
Abraham's wanting to, but he's like, okay, we're not going to get anywhere with this.
Yeah, Abraham's annoyed, but he's like, okay, yeah, he sees that it's not moving forward.
I suppose you can shoot stuff.
Yeah, so they go off, and they're just driving. They said it was a 2-day trip. At the end of the first night, they're sleeping in their truck, and you hear a noise, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a gun put up to Abraham's head right when he sits up. And you find out that these raiders they're just raiding. And they stumbled upon their truck and were like, ooh, jackpot. So it gets to the point where they got guns pointed at Abraham and Rick. And they're like, what do we have here? A helpless little boy. And then as raiders, for some reason, you can't be a raider and not be a child rapist. It's just like
it's like when they took
it's a prereq.
Job applications must be pedophile to be scum of the earth. Then again, that makes sense.
It's like, you're a pretty rad dude. I want you in my gang. But I got one question. You ever raped a child? And then just, no. Okay, boom, dead on sight. But if you have, they're chummy. They'll crack you open a fresh can of green beans.
Which is why these scenes are so damn gratifying.
Right. Because they're so despicable.
I mean, ironically though, because it's, and I think in no. In the comics, he bit the guy who was going to. No, he didn't.
I don't remember. So basically, yeah, they're holding down Carl. They're alluding to the fact they're going to rape him. And then, it's not quite like the show. I don't remember exactly. Rick's unarmed.
Rick just reacts.
And Rick just says, no. Quite simply. N-O, period.
Well, because in the comics, he doesn't have that build-up. And I actually really liked the build-up.
Right.
Because you can see, it's not, granted, it was a little Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in a way that you're like, let's go. But
it was the way they shot. Honestly, it was camera work.
Yeah, but then again, I'm sure you don't just, it takes training and whatnot to snap into it. He actually had to, the heart had to start beating faster.
Right.
His eye, I'm sure had he been able to do this, his eyes would have dilated. He would have hit fight or flight.
Right.
That takes a couple of seconds.
Right.
But once it's happening, back headbutt.
And then the weakest punch ever. But
he's got a gimp hand.
Yeah, in the comics, he bites the jugular, and then when the guy's O-facing, that's got the gun up to Abraham's like, ooh. Yeah, Abraham elbow to the head, and then takes his gun, and then him and Rick dispatch the rest of them. And it's kind of, at that point, forward. So it was more random in the comics. It wasn't as directed with this because they had that gang build up with Daryl for a while. But in the comics, it served the purpose of winning Abraham's respect for Rick.
Yeah, because that man's got resolve.
Yeah.
He
that
pulled,
man's
he
gonna
pulled a
protect
Walker.
his own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very much
He
so.
pulled a Walker Texas Ranger. Or wait, are you talking about Walker?
Walker. He pulled a Walker.
And a Texas Ranger. I don't want to bump into Walker Texas Ranger zombie. That is...
Oh, my God, roundhouse kick you in that.
Walker, the Texas Walker. So it was more random in the comics. It served its purpose, though. And that's actually one of my favorite things about the comics is sort of... Nobody ever likes Rick at first.
Oh, yeah.
And it's satisfying seeing how he wins their respect.
Yeah.
Because he's the best.
Which actually explains a lot of the interactions later and why. Okay, I can't go
So,
there.
so in the show, though, it's with the Raiders that Daryl's with. Daryl comes up, he backs him up. He's like, I know these people are good people. You don't want to kill them. But then the guy, is out for blood, I guess. I don't know.
Well, he's just disappointed.
Commence the raping!
Yeah. And then, of course, Daryl's getting the snot beat out of him by two people,
Right.
but also not fighting back.
Right.
Because all of his friends are at gunpoint. I love how, the guy looks at Michonne and goes, "You're next, pretty girl." And I'm like,
Right.
okay, dude, did you have to be that cliche?
Right.
But yeah. And, of course, poor Carl is just, it's always the fat, creepy, bald guy.
Right. It's not even the guy's that strong. He just has a lot of weight to place upon him.
Okay, we're not, we gotta stop
Point
right
is,
there.
though, I agree with you. I did like the build up in the show of cause Rick's, he does the headbutt and he punches him cause he's trying to fight back normally.
And, it just
And
doesn't
then
go well.
the guy bear hugs him and is like, trying to talk
Which,
some smack.
hand-to-hand combat lesson, really quick. In a life or death situation, you have to remember, humans have teeth.
Yeah, don't face them. Don't face them face to face. If you're gonna grapple them, go from behind.
Or better, there are positions. Like if you drive your forehead into their chin and push their head up, there's actual combative positions that you can
Right.
do that. But this guy's just like, "What you gonna do now?" Gives him a bear hug, and Rick's
Yeah.
like, "This."
Bob's for apples real quick. Pulls up bobbing for giblets real quick.
big red juicy ones. But yeah, so that was glorious. We loved it. I cheered. And then of course Rick takes the knife from the man who was trying to rape Carl and dispatches him in a glorious
In a
fashion.
glorious manner.
And so that's actually
And so yeah, the differences were different, but I think the writers realized, and we'll actually go into why it pertains to Rick, his arc later.
Yeah.
But the writers saw that scene and were like, "This is too good not to use."
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't want the show to follow the comic, beat for beat, but if it's a good beat, the writers need to recognize that and pull it from the comic 100% of the time.
exactly. Which also brings us to the last kind of thing that mirrors the comic, and this is a little ahead of where Kev's been in the comics, so I apologize. But
I'm familiar with the character though.
so there's a character named Jesus. Actually, his name's Paul. But, which
It's
it's ironic, actually. Yeah.
They couldn't resist, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, right. So he's the DC. No, he's the Alexandria Safe Zone.
It's in DC.
Yeah. So
Flash forward, they get to DC in the comics.
Yeah. He's a representative / head honcho guy, kind of their de facto leader-ish person. He has to facilitate running through dealing with guys like Negan, who your comic guy, what I'm talking about.
Right.
So he's a pragmatist, but eventually he becomes kind of like a right-hand man to Rick. So
Right.
he actually kind of it's.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, he becomes Rick's right-hand man, but really the parallels are sort of in his application, because he's like this pseudo-ninja,
Yeah.
stealth man, get you out of jail free card. Well, no, I don't want to say free, but get
Like,
you out of jail card.
They don't ever explain why he has Krav
this
Maga
training,
skills.
right?
Like, with Daryl, redneck mother effer with a, crossbow. Okay.
Fair enough.
All right. I have nothing to argue this with.
Right.
Fine. They don't explain it to him. But the difference is I think Daryl, it's going to take a lot more of Rick asking Daryl to do bad things before Daryl starts to even question Rick.
Right.
Whereas the moment you do something Jesus thinks is bad or stupid, he's gonna be, and it's not gonna be personal. He might even be sad about it, but he will take actions as he sees fit is the best of the whole group.
Right.
So, it's a cool parallel.
I should know what that is because I'm in legal and ethical studies right now. There's a term for the people that their actions are based solely on what is the good of the group.
It's not utilitarian, is it?
Utilitarian,
Yeah,
exactly.
because I'm taking bioethics.
Yeah, no, it is utilitarian. So you weigh the pros and the cons, and whatever helps the group, not even necessarily yourself, the most, you do it.
Yeah.
So, but the parallel, yeah.
Whereas Daryl's more of a virtue-based person.
Right.
Yeah.
And the parallel really is in, like I said, the application, sort of their skill set. And so that's why it's going to be interesting. We'll get into this a little bit later, but it's going to be interesting when they introduce Jesus to the show. Because in the comic, Daryl doesn't exist in the comic. And so the dynamic, I'm really curious to see.
How's that going to work?
How's that going to work? So, talking about curious to see, we're going to transition now. The fact that the show righted itself with season 4, part 2, and started introducing more comic elements into it, has led us to believe that they will continue to do so into season 5.
Mm.
And for that reason, we want to give you guys some of our hopes and some of the things we anticipate. I don't want to say predictions. We don't want to be that bold because a lot of these probably won't happen. But we hope that these elements from the comics will make their way in whatever variant or whatever iteration that they choose to go with it in the show.
Yep. So the first one is kind of it's more of a subtle thing, and it's kind of a long shot. It just popped into my head one day. I wonder if Tara will have a Chewbacca kind of role in dealing with Maggie or Glenn. So,
like just vicious body hair, just breakouts of body hair, and no razor with which to.
Just claws, teeth.
What do you call those? Bandolier? Is that a bandolier?
It's a bandolier. It's a bandolier.
Okay, because it doesn't hold any particular.
Well, you can't beat, and you soon you won't even be able to beat her at checkers. Show up your arms out. No, okay. So what I mean by Chewbacca is, a life debt kind of a thing where she is undyingly, zero questions asked, going to be loyal and protect with her life and her utilities, whatever they may be, for Glenn or Maggie. I think the reason for Glenn is because Glenn was her quote-unquote savior, mentally. Right. He brought her out of the darkness. And that's pretty simple.
I think she can also, though, sense that Glenn is a true person. I think with the whole governor thing, and she kind of trusts him, she's, torn to that. But with Glenn, she can see, he is who he says he is.
And he's entirely
possessed
himself
to be.
Yeah, he's devoted. He represents, I think, what she wants in life, is that partner. Because she didn't even have that in the girl she was with.
Yeah.
The girl was too worldly.
Right.
So, for that, I understand that loyalty. And if Glenn continues to function in the show, I think that the loyalty will be towards him. What I think would be interesting is if they ever kill Glenn off.
Right.
I could very easily see them twisting it to where, okay, in case you didn't know, Tara is lesbian. She likes girls. So, no shit.
The redundancy of Department of Redundancy Department?
Yeah, that one. So, as such, she's clearly taken by how beautiful Maggie is.
Right.
Then again, who wouldn't be? She's probably the hottest woman in the world.
He likes females, yeah. And you're in the zombie apocalypse, that's hard to come by.
That's Aphrodite right there. That's what that is.
Right.
So, and clearly,
it's like a mirage.
Right. And honestly, Glenn has talked her up and explained, and he's consumed by his will to be with her again. That's probably kind of built her up. Right. And she's guilty about her.
She lived up to it, but then Maggie lived up to the hype.
Yeah. So there probably is, it's a very weird and opponent combination. She has a great affection for this person in a philosophia sense, in the thought of her, what she is to someone who's important to her now.
In an altruistic sense, yeah.
And also in a somewhat romantic / sexual sense. She's attracted to her. Wait,
who are we talking about? Were you talking about Glenn?
No, sorry. No. I'm actually talking about Maggie now. If Glenn were to be killed off somehow.
So I think she's attached to Glenn altruistically, and she's attached to Maggie. Well, she probably is altruistically too, but she doesn't know her yet, but exactly. Off the bat, she's sexually attracted to Maggie.
So if Glenn, and you could totally see Glenn dying words, doesn't get to have the dying words of Maggie, tells Tara, take care of Maggie. That would just seal it right there. You have Chewbacca. She grows the hair, grows to 5 feet tall. Maggie, everybody better watch out, because if you mess with Maggie, Tara's gonna be on you with a shotgun. So, I could see that happening, and that'd be really interesting, because that would be a total subversion of the psycho lesbian.
Right.
And it would actually have a very almost masculine role, but not in a disparaging or cliche way. It would actually be
necessary in this case.
Yeah, like,
Instead of like, one of us has to be the boy.
no, it'd be legit, like actually, yeah.
Right.
So that's one. The second one is, I mean, I wonder how, I mean, this one's actually easy for them to do.
So in the comics, at one point later on, a little bit later in the story, they've kind of settled into a new area, and they're sort of getting into the politics of that whole area, and getting used to all the new survivors they're meeting. And at one point, there's a zombie breaking through their walls. They have walls at the new settlement, and they prove not to be as sturdy as they were. And so they sort of get in this fiasco where they're getting surrounded by zombies in their settlement, and people start freaking out and start shooting. Right. And Carl is the victim of a stray bullet, and it hits him right through his, I don't know I was about to specify which eye, but one of his eyes gets hit.
It's his right eye.
I think you're right. I think it's his right eye gets hit, and it chunks a piece of his brain. And so he goes into a coma. Well, I mean, getting shot in the eye might send you into a coma anyways, but he ends up going into a coma for a good length of time, and when he wakes up, he's like, where's Mom? Yeah. He's like, Dad, I'm glad to see you, but, you know, I figured Mom would be here. And then you're like, oh gosh, he doesn't remember things.
Here we go.
And then you eventually find out, like, and this is where it gets real messed up, and where you kind of start to feel bad for Carl. He has dreams of things. Like, he has dreams of when he shot the twin. But he doesn't know that really happened. He thinks it's just a dream. But he's like, why do I keep having this dream?
So let's add a screwy sense of reality to an already very tenuous... Right. Yeah. Yes.
And that's why it's hard. For Carl, it's like, you know, Carl starts to drift into the twin territory where, like, oh, he's just deranged. Like, honestly, you had to put him down, and it's not his fault. But then again, you're like, he's very useful. He's very capable, and he's not bad. He's not bad per se.
No, he's not
really his
fault.
He's
not murderous. He's not actually malicious.
And he's not just angsty. That's the thing I don't like about the show. And maybe it's nothing against the actor,
though,
but he's older.
Minus the kind of like offness of severe brain trauma. You kind of expect a kid that age to be a little twerp.
Right.
We all were.
Right. Well, the thing is, that's the one thing I will admit. The actor that they've gotten to play it at no fault to their own.
Bueno.
But he is older now because the show just takes longer. Mm-hmm. Like, the comic can take however long you want, and they'll be the same age. Hence, The Simpsons has been running out animated. And Bart has not grown a day older. To
which we were happy. We don't want that man driving a car.
I think Carl in the book's 9 or 10, and in the show now he's like 14. So it's like, I guess it's
perfect
hard to
twerp age. Perfect.
Right. So the way I would like to see this come into play, you know, Carl has had a lot of issues with Rick. I think through the jugular biting, Rick has now earned Carl's respect. And he didn't need to earn Abraham's respect there.
I wouldn't bet on that.
Yeah, probably right. But let's just hypothetically say that Carl at least
has logic
and sees, like, everything his dad does is for the good of the group. Like, his dad's not dumb. He's not more capable. He's not ready to lead more
certainly
than
not weak.
Rick. Right, and he's not weak. Yeah,
I love that.
That was his thing. Yeah, Carl says, you didn't act. You didn't go search out the governor, which in Rick's defense.
No, he was busy making food, you moron.
Right.
Trying to teach you how to make more food.
So let's just hypothetically say that Rick has earned Carl's respect. You know, it would be interesting to see Carl fall victim to the gunshot again. Just to see what that would do with his relationship with Rick. Now, you know, would he forget that they...
Oh man, that would be bad.
...smooth things over and that Rick is
Well, worse
the
yet,
man?
though, I can see the show going really easily to just dealing with the fact that he might have disfigurement and his eye. You don't even need to go into the brain thing, because the brain thing would be hard to run with.
Well, you don't think they should go into Where's Mom?
Oh, God. I mean, that would be cool, but...
See, that would be a cool thing to, like... that would be a believable reason to make Rick pause. Like, he's not questioning himself anymore, but this is hard to deal with. Like, your son, like, not remembering.
Yeah, and honestly, you could have short-term memory loss. That'd be great. But the problem is, you go too far into the psychological problems. We're seeing Rick in Carl too much at that point.
Right.
But you want to talk about? I mean, even literally in EMT class, they tell you there are a couple of things you got to worry about when dealing with an injury with a teenager, especially early teens. Fear of disfigurement is huge. You cannot look at an injury and go, oh, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
You look weird. Worst thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And some EMTs don't, and paramedics don't mean to do it.
Well, yeah, it's
just
instinctual. I mean,
like, ugh, you can't do that. You've got to keep a straight face because you know
well, because I mean, the thing is too, when it's, I mean, I guess I can't really speak from experience, but the way I imagine it is like if you had a disfigurement, you're actually watching the unverbals a lot too, because you know everyone's gonna be nice, everyone's gonna be like, oh, it's not bad, but like those people are so sensitive at that point, and that they're gauging your reaction based on even your facial expression. So it's like it's hard not to make your face grimace sometimes when you see, you know what I mean? Like
and
you
that's
might not
literally what they tell you is like you need to be able to work on having a poker face,
right?
Because they'll know they're not stupid.
Right.
You can never assume that the patient is stupid, but that's enough EMT stuff.
Yeah, so basically, I think there's a lot of cool directions they could go with that, and I think it would be something that could build a little bit of sympathy for Carl. I mean, I guess him almost getting raped builds a little sympathy, but they still need more in terms of like, Carl, you're still annoying.
Give it 3 episodes before he pisses us off.
Right, yeah. So I think it'd be a good way to build some sympathy from Carl, and I think there's a lot of good, interesting angles to take with it. So
yep,
I hope to see that.
Well, now that we've covered the bratty little kid, let's get to the man of the hour. When is Rick going to meet a woman?
Right.
I mean, it's not too much to ask. There's probably tons of women walking around trying to eat people's faces.
That's what I'm saying.
They want to suck face really badly, really, really badly.
But like,
he's just too picky.
He's too picky, man. All you gotta do is cut off a walker's jaw, and you got a perfectly good companion.
Okay. I opened that can of worms,
Yeah,
but I am
did.
shutting it right now.
No walker companions. He needs a true companion, a living. Well, I guess they're living, but a comprehending partner.
We don't want to go to the philosophy of whether or not a walker is alive or not, but
so. Rick needs...
Technically, they reproduce.
Rick needs a better half, dang it, because Lori was by far the worst half. I think we can agree.
We just completely
not necessarily in the comics. She wasn't as bad in the comics.
The only character the TV show messed up worse than Lori was the other second half of Rick in the comics. She's gone, thank God.
Right.
We're of course referring to the she-devil Andrea.
Right.
She's gone, and we're happy for it. But now, who's Rick going to be with?
Right. Rick needs a little loving.
I mean, Michonne has clearly been tossed into like weird aunt status. Like that's just not even like that won't even be considered.
Right. Right. And Maggie is clearly claimed by Tara.
Tara's
like
claim.
Tara goes, I claimed. Sloppy seconds claimed.
You just see Glenn go. You can't claim. You did claim her! She didn't claim. Oh, God. Okay. Sorry, folks. You know that joke was coming.
It's like Glenn dies.
You tell me a whole
Glenn dies, and Tara looks right at Maggie. She's like, leftovers claimed.
You know that, like, a girl like Maggie in that world probably tears camps apart.
Oh,
in most
yeah.
cases. You just see infighting happen right then.
Right.
But, anyways.
Because really, I mean, what's left to fight for? I mean, we already fight for beautiful women, and when we could have anything in the world.
Right.
When you can't have much, a woman, it goes a long way.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's like, I'm going to make my last moments on Earth at least happy.
Right.
But
so, I actually am not that interested by this. Going into next season, I could do fine without this, but it's just something that I'm wondering if they'll explore. In the comics, Rick has...
Because if we want more drama with Carl, this is the way to do it.
Oh, yeah. Rick's has a very brief fling, and I mean brief fling in the comics. It builds up where this woman has an abusive husband, and so initially Rick sort of takes attention to her just to protect her.
Rick pulls a Shane.
Yeah, he does. He's just... Well, no. No, he doesn't. But yeah. But he basically...
I'm sorry, like, pre-mental breakdown Shane, when Shane, like, goes to town on Carol's ex.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Pounds into a pulp.
Oh, from the show, my bad. I'm thinking comic Shane.
No.
Because I'm thinking comic Rick right now. Fair enough. Yeah,
he pulls a Shane.
Yeah, he does pull Shane then. He pulls a show Shane in the comics. That is confusing to follow, but it's true. Where I
take full responsibility for the confusion.
Yeah, so he ends up confronting this dude who's abusive and beating the crap out of him, and then that guy loses his mind basically with fury, and they have to put him down. So now it's a widowed woman with her son, and so Rick is good guy Rick. He's still not actually trying to take advantage of her. He just starts to kind of spend some time with her to like comfort her and be there.
And she offers.
And then she eventually offers, and so they have a little fling, and Rick gets killed inadvertently, but it's because he doesn't. Basically, whenever Carl gets shot,
to be fair, she froze up.
Yeah, well, to preface, when Carl gets shot through the eye, moments before this, they basically are trapped in their house, and they don't know when they're going to get these walkers cleared, and they're like, well, we gotta get with the other survivors, and so Rick goes, I had this idea that worked back in Atlanta, where they covered themselves in zombie goop, and they didn't smell quite as bad like humans, and they could crawl through. So that's what they do. They cover themselves in the goop and they start walking. And one thing Rick forgets is that this woman and her son have been living in this camp for about the whole time. Like, they haven't been out on the road, so they're not tempered the same way Carl is. Specifically, the little boy is not tempered the way Carl is. The woman is strong enough with Rick. She's like, Rick, at this point, I trust you. She's holding hands with Rick. I'm strong.
The kid doesn't.
Yeah, the kid sort of, wets himself. Like any kid, I think, might in that situation.
Yeah, I was saying. And then, of course,
the zombies smell urine. My favorite.
Yeah, they're like, wait, you're not one of us.
They're like, they eat him, and they're like, this isn't urine, this is urine flavoring. But the kid.
Only The Walking Dead could spawn a joke like that, and that's not be complete freaking
right,
psychopaths.
Right. Well, I'm talking about butter and butter flavoring for those.
Yeah.
Pick up on that. But basically, the kid gets chomped, and obviously the woman seeing her son being eaten is like, no, we gotta save him. And then Rick's like, even if we get him out of that,
he's done.
You gotta let go. And she starts getting bit, and then she's not letting go of Rick, and I'm pretty sure he cuts off her arm.
Oh, he does. No, not even that. Yeah, they say, and he's just like, I'm sorry.
Right? Yeah, he cuts off her arm. I was like, Rick, that's awesome. But
right.
You're like, Rick, you just got these people
good
killed.
Job!
And the funny thing about it is they end up clearing out the walkers. Not too much.
Yeah, that actually, and
but it brought up, but before the hilarity of, well, it's not that funny actually, of them getting killed, but it was just like ironic. It was like, cause you thought she was gonna be in this now. You're like, she's gonna be main character.
It was such a tease. It was such a.
But it brought up some interesting things about Rick moving on from Lori. I think, he's already dispatched with the phone in the show, but in the comics it was around this time that he throws away the phone, and because he's not talking to Lori. He's like, I'm trying to move on, Lori. I have to protect Carl, to protect everybody.
Exactly.
And so I don't think they're gonna, if they do bring in a love interest for Rick, I don't think they'll kill her one episode in or anything like that.
We're gonna knock on wood for that one.
I'm gonna knock wood on wood. That's a back scratcher on a desk right there. That's a solid foundation.
Quadruple good luck.
Right? Seriously. I don't think they'll go that route, but I am curious if they will introduce anybody sooner than later.
Well, speaking of comic love interests,
Yeah.
With Andrea dead, as awesome as that is for the show's integrity.
Wait. Let's try this again. With Andrea dead, high five.
Hadouken.
We finally can move on.
We don't have. Well, but here's the problem. We don't have a sharpshooter now.
Yeah, this is one thing Mike told me. He's like, because like anybody who watched the show, I'm like, Andrea is so horribly written. She's finicky. Finicky. She wobbles.
We call
one
this
way
the
to
Jamie.
next.
They call this the Jamie Lannister effect, where I know something from an outside source, and I go, just trust me.
Right. Yeah, Jamie Lannister will be a beast. Just give us some time. I'm like, no, dude, he's a twincester. Done. Case closed. Close the book on that one.
Push the kid out the window. That was just the first episode.
Granted, yeah, right. He did a lot of things wrong. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but first impression shouldn't be everything. But that was a strong first impression,
right?
But with Andrea, Mike goes, in the comics she's great, and so when I started reading the comics, I was actually trying to resent it at first. I was like, she's not that good. And then, yeah, she's actually one of the best characters in the comics. She's one of the most grounded. She's the most
and she's useful.
But yet she's still affectionate, and yes, she's useful. And
she does something
in a way that's convincing. Whereas, like in the show, I was like, "Really, is she the sharpshooter?" Like they just sort of force that on you. Like they'd be doing shooting practice.
Apparently not, because she didn't actually kill Daryl. As happy as we all are,
right? Thank goodness she didn't know what she was doing, because then Daryl would have died. But
they thought about it,
right?
And they were like, no.
Right.
We're not killing off Daryl. Especially from her.
And it is funny because, like you said, of comic love interests, there's a couple different times where Andrea and Rick are attracted to each other and like think about it, and because honestly, those two characters would be the best for each other in the comics by far. But they kind of like just agree like, no, we have a whole group to protect now, like we can't. And so, but yeah, the real value of Andrea in the comics though is that she is the sharpshooter, and that comes into play often.
She honestly, in a way, she is Daryl.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not a tactile Daryl, but a very much X Factor.
Right.
Here's the deal. Either you...
Like Rick, I don't want to say use, he knows how to utilize her though.
Well,
Rick always knows where to put Andrea, so she's
either an
most
ambush.
Effective.
Yeah, see, she's either an ambush or a surprise. Or she's a psychological weapon, as much as she is a physical.
Right.
And that's what Daryl is too. Anybody who knows what Daryl's capable of is wary and probably puts a little too much concern on what Daryl's doing versus everyone else.
Right.
But
Daryl's that guy you stash in the woods, and then they're talking ish, and then a bolt flies to their guy, and you're like, wait, what? It's the same effect where, like, an aggressor is coming against the town, and is making all these bold claims, and all of a sudden a red dot just shows up on their head, and Rick's like, I'm sorry, I'm fuzzy in my left ear, I need you to repeat that. And then they're like, like that's Andrew's effect.
Better yet, why don't you do a tap dance?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Better yet, why don't you sing for me? So, we don't know exactly where we're gonna go with it, and how close to comics it'll be next season, but it's just a safe bet that they need a sharpshooter.
And you know what? Maybe it's the chick that's with Abraham. What's her face?
Oh yeah, so yeah, that's a good theory actually.
The only other hot
is
woman...
it Rosie, Natalie,
God, I can't remember her name.
Rosalinda,
something with an R.
Yeah, something along those lines.
But yeah, she I mean, then again, she's actually though that might not work. She's got an M16.
Is it Rosalind?
It might be Rosalind.
Rosalind Franklin. No wonder we can't remember it. I can't, like the whole science community forgot about Rosalind Franklin.
God.
I've forgotten what her name is. But yeah, I think they're going to need a sharpshooter. Honestly, if miracles could happen, I would love it to be Dwayne. If Dwayne could come back and be the sharpshooter. He's in the comics. For those who don't know, Dwayne does come back in the comics.
Yeah. Well,
he's not as cool. I don't care for his character that much, actually, the way they portray him in the comics. But a lot of it's understandable. He loses his son, and comes back a kind of a broken man. And honestly, one of my favorite episodes of season 3 was when Rick went back to that town and found him.
Dwayne has guns.
Right. Yeah, it's like
honestly, to be honest, I'm surprised Rick doesn't come to Dwayne once they've established the prison and say, last chance offer. I will not come and bug you again.
Well, they had established a prison, we saw. And he offered.
Oh, that's
He's
right.
like, you should
right.
come with me, dude. You have a chance to, like, make something of it. Like, I get that your son's dead. Like, I lost my wife. He offers.
True.
And Dwayne says, no, I don't know why. They should have brought Dwayne. I don't know why they didn't.
I mean, granted, I'm sorry. So I should preface it. They should have gone and asked again. This time they should have brought a whole group of people to actually kind of say, listen.
Yeah, but you don't want to get somebody in that group sniped by a crazy Dwayne.
Well, no, but so it's like Rick goes, hey, I don't think you understand. I actually have
a life.
People.
Right.
Look, and then you miss. She's like, watch, they're not here to hurt you. Look, there's all these people. There's other kids.
Right.
You can help us. But I mean, then again, he's nuts. So
It's
and not necessarily a fun batch of nuts.
I would say in the show he's like broken, but he's capable.
Very dangerous.
In the comic, not really. He's just sort of there.
He's
He's
just
like,
like,
I am the mope.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm so sad.
I'm the rare mope.
I'm like, come on, don't snuffle up against this thing. You're sad? Get a katana.
You have been waiting.
And run into that crowd.
You must be You've been waiting for a chance. To
right?
use that
You go Hulk smash that pile of zombies right there. Okay, you don't cry in the corner. We don't got time. We ain't got time.
We
for
do
that.
not have time for that. Or better yet, if you're gonna cry in the corner, give us your weapons.
Right.
You're not using them.
Right.
At least you're not using them properly. But
so speaking of not ready for that.
Jesus.
So we mentioned Jesus earlier. He kind of turns into a more pivotal character later on in the plot. And, judging by how slow this season went is why we're hesitant to kind of like predict that he's going to show up. But I think there's a strong chance that he shows up towards the end of next season.
It all depends on how fast they clear these cannibals in the next when the next.
Oh
season
yeah.
starts.
By the way, our theory is that they're these are the cannibals because they do run into a pack of cannibals in the comics.
It ain't a theory. They were human bones.
That's fair enough. And actually, you know what? Here's how you know.
They're eating meat.
I read online a couple of people that were like, "Really, Rick?" It's like, because he goes, "They're gonna regret it when they find out," and the music swells, and then zooms in on Rick's face. He's like, "They're screwing with the wrong people." Some people didn't like that because it's kind of cheesy, and it was a lot of build up for it.
Cheese.
But what people need to understand is that's actually a direct quote from the comics. It's not nearly as hyped up like with this whole Terminus plot that took up the whole season. It was real quick in the comics again. Dale actually gets abducted by cannibals. And they try to use him as bait to bait in the rest of Rick's crew so they can have more food. And then Rick gets the jump on them, and they spot the cannibals, and they know who they are. The cannibals didn't think they knew who they were, and then so Rick's basically says the same thing where he's like, "Man, they're gonna regret it," and they're like, "Regret what?" They're gonna regret screwing with the wrong people. So it was a direct quote by Rick.
And see, where I would have the dialogue I would have changed slightly. It would have been like,
but I almost think they did that to further cement that it was cannibals. I think that was another nod to like anybody who reads the comics.
But you could have stayed true to that vein of thought. But it's like, as long as we're going to be alive, Abraham saying that. I don't know why I gave him a southern twang, but Rick could just go, "Nah, they messed with the wrong people." Had they said it like that, it's not even that different. But it's like if you make him calm and collected, like it's like, nah.
Right.
Nah,
You're expecting like this is Sparta, and he's like, "They're screwing with the wrong people."
Or better yet, I was expecting him to go they're gonna...
Honestly, he should have said they're screwing with the wrong people, and then the music should have swelled.
Yeah, exactly.
To be honest.
I was actually thinking like he had some kind of a plan. He's like, they mess with the wrong people, and you just see Carol and Tyrese like
waiting in the bushes,
ready to do something. Because
right.
honestly, that's what I do in that situation. I don't bring everybody in it. We may want everybody gathered up pretty well, but we don't necessarily want everybody gathered up pretty well.
Right.
Because we need options. Better yet, you don't have Daryl going. You have Daryl in the forest. Because if anybody can break them out at night, stealth
That's
somebody.
That's true.
It's
Yeah,
Daryl.
they shouldn't have all gone in.
But yeah, you give Daryl. Oh God, I hope Daryl knows how to shoot. You give Daryl any kind of a ranged weapon.
Right.
It's fun. But anyways,
I guess Daryl could become the sharpshooter, but I mean, he doesn't really. They haven't shown him use
who's
guns
going to use
ever.
the crossbow?
Yeah, right. Somebody's got a crossbow.
Somebody has
It
to.
ain't Walking Dead the show unless there's a crossbow involved.
Well, but we thought we said that about the poncho, and now some jerk in the cannibals has it.
Right. That was a guy. I like that scene when Rick's kind of like cluing in.
So now that we've kind of like talked about what we're looking forward to.
Wait, whoa! Do we cover Jesus adequately? I feel like we went back into sharpshooter territory.
Yeah, we did actually.
Basically, yeah. So with Jesus, basically all we'll say here is, we've been mentioning how they take comic plots and make an interesting twist. Well, in the comic, they don't know who Jesus is, and Jesus just totally incapacitates Michonne and Abraham with his hands.
Which to be fair,
Which at that point is
a
like,
semi-gelatinous Abraham in the TV show.
Mike, give it up. He's just gonna be gelatinous, okay?
Okay, he is jealous. Honestly, like Abraham in the show, he's a big dude, but he ain't jacked.
Imposing.
He ain't jacked. Abraham in the comics is tank gunner, able to stay on the base and lift all day long.
Well, everyone
Jacked.
else was scavenging for green beans. He was scavenging for like HGH.
He's protein.
Yeah.
He's
Right. Like, I mean, he must do
built.
copious amounts of push-ups.
Where he's getting the cow meat that he's been building the muscle with, I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But he's big. And so the fact that, and not only that, he took out Ninja Woman,
Yeah.
Shinobi.
Well, she's a samurai, Mike. Come on.
Kunoichi.
Come on. I
Kunoichi.
will pet your belly, Mike. She's a samurai.
Well,
Salmon ninja. Ninja Rai. Whatever we'll go with it. But
push
yeah,
on.
Jesus just totally incapacitates him. And so you're like, what? And then you kind of find out he has a lot of utility, like Dale. He's quick on his feet, he's light, he's stealthy, and all that.
I would imagine that they might reveal at some point that he has some kind of training.
Right. And, just to preface, I think we did earlier, but he's like the spec ops of this other settlement in DC where they eventually end up.
He's the stealth / I mean, he's kind of like an amalgamation of Glenn and Daryl.
Right.
So he's covert ops in the
He's the runner, but he can also fight his way out of a paper bag.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And it's just gonna be interesting to see, and I'm curious to see with Daryl. Like, I just don't see Daryl would
This world ain't big enough for the.
Here's the only way this works. Jesus assesses the situation, sees Michonne, Abraham, Daryl, Rick, and takes Daryl out first. Because the second Jesus would take out, let's say, Michonne, Daryl's gonna back up and be like, "You're not getting near me." Like, it's gonna be interesting dynamic to see how they play it out.
I think a funny reaction would be Daryl and Jesus come at. I mean, Daryl and Jesus immediately, like, they're on the same page, and so they're coming at each other. And they both, like, back off at the same time, because it's like...
Look, we need to team up.
It's like, well, no, it's like that spider sense, like...
That must have been like when Simon and Garfunkel first met face to face.
Like, it's power up.
I'm awesome. You're awesome. We could be awesomer together.
Yeah. Well, but it's kind of like, I mean, if anybody who's ever sparred with somebody who they knew was good, and it's a similar talent level, you see this in boxing all the time. They're sitting there, and like, you're both a nope. We're both a nope.
Right, that's why the first round is always so boring, because it's just like they're trying to pick up the rhythms. Like, I'm not going full in and exposing myself until I know what the pacing of
Combat
this
is a giant game of chicken amongst
Right.
skilled people. But, so I think that's kind of my
Don't
expectation.
you call me chicken.
But, so yeah, now that we've...
You calling me yellow?
No,
so,
you're a white chicken.
Right. So, real quick, who should play Jesus? Should Jim Caviezel? Or no, who's Jesus in Passion of the Christ? What's that dude's name? Should it just be Christian Bale? Should Christian Bale be Jesus, Mike?
Honestly, Christian Bale would actually, like, in terms of body type, a lithe Christian Bale would work.
Right.
A less ripped Hugh Jackman, I think would work.
Oh yeah. Where a less prone to singing Hugh Jackman would work, I think, a little bit.
And honestly, a younger Liam Neeson would be...
Okay, Mike. You can't just work in hypotheticals here.
Okay, fair.
Now you got me all excited for a young Liam Neeson somehow showing
enough.
up, riding on the rainbow of hope and landing into this show.
Actually, you know what? You might not know this guy.
I agree, though. Young Liam Neeson would be awesome. Jesus.
There's a guy named
Leonardo DiCaprio.
God, no. What is this guy's name? He played Gannicus in Spartacus.
Yeah, I've never seen that, Mike. Yeah.
God, what is that guy's name? Dustin Clare. Anybody who knows what I'm talking about. He's short. He's built pretty well. He can go from being like that, like, have a six-pack and I've got kind of biceps, to jacked. So, I mean, he doesn't, he wouldn't be bulky, but he's got that light on his feet. He's very acrobatic. He would work.
Right. And I'm sure he already has the beard from Spartacus.
No, actually, he's the only clean-shaven.
Figures, yeah.
I mean,
he goes from being the only clean-shaven in a world of beards.
I mean, he is a Celt, and they did like to be clean. I have no basis for that claim. But yeah, so that's our hopes. And
so those are our hopes, and those are what we're keeping our fingers crossed for. Assuming that they keep with the trend of incorporating the comic beats into the show. I think. It's hard to say because for some reason stupid people gave this half season mixed results. Like compared to part one, part two was infinitely better. Hopefully there was enough positive feedback to this season that maybe increased viewership because I feel like they did lose a little bit compared to season 2 and 1. So hopefully there's enough positive reaction that they'll keep this trend going.
Yeah. That being said, we do have. We have a couple of things that we're worried about / probably may present a problem. So, for the first one, it'll be really quick. I'll get out of the way. I don't want to see a cliche lesbian, crazy woman dynamic for Tara. I don't want to see it. It's happened too much. It's too common in comics. It's too common in everything. Don't do it. Just don't. It's patronizing and disparaging to the LGBTQ community, and I'm not even really jumping on that bandwagon. It's bad storytelling. Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why but I get the intrigue. I think the dynamic will be cool of, like, she's attracted to Maggie, but she's loyal to Glenn, so she's not gonna pursue anything towards Maggie.
Well, and she's not a cardboard character.
Right.
That's a person with feelings and thoughts and so that's great.
It's like, so even though Maggie's the only one that she's attracted to, like, she still has a sense of honor. So I think they won't fall into that territory, but they'll probably switch writers again. That's one thing with the show. They switch writers every season nearly. So yeah, who knows? All this momentum they built with her maybe might dissipate. Let's hope not.
Yeah. Second one, and this is one that I'm less and less worried about the more I talk about it with Kevin and the more I talk about it with other fans. I don't want Negan popping up too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about Negan, like hush, terrified whispers and hushed corners, Negan just did this.
His name rides on the wind.
Yeah, like Negan needs to be built up very slowly. Kind of like the governor wasn't in that season. Now, granted, the governor didn't need to be, but I need Negan to be. I need that payoff. I need that moment to where Rick goes, "Who the hell are you?" You just see the smile. I'm Negan. My name's Negan. And at that point, you just have that oh crap moment. So
Michonne says, "What'd you call me?" So I don't think he'll show up, but we don't want another governor on our hands.
No,
let's agree to that.
Yeah.
So next thing we're worried about, and this is what I meant when I was saying a lot earlier about they had all this momentum, I thought, with Rick in season 2. And it's fine to have him have some relapses and some, new struggles and whatnot, but I didn't like the way they handled it. And at this stage in the show, specifically after the jugular vein incident, nom nom nom, I like where they're at with Rick. He him and Daryl have a sit down by this truck afterwards, and Daryl, they're talking about various things, but Daryl sort of brings up him stabbing the guy repeatedly for satisfaction. And he's like, you know what, man, it's all good. That ain't you. And then Rick goes, no, that's me. He's like, the farmer Rick, that's me too. But, I do have this inside of me, but I use it. That's part of what makes me effective. And it's kind of like Rick putting everything together. Whereas, like, for a while, Rick, Shane was pushing Rick to be, you're not assertive enough. And even Carl, too, you didn't go after the governor, because Rick's like, I'm trying to suppress my animal instinct, I'm not trying to go full Wolverine.
We're trying to not go back to the Rick-tatorship.
Right, yeah, I don't want a Rick-tatorship. And, he's fighting that, but then he's good guy Rick.
You can have him look at Carl. You can't have it both ways, Carl.
Right. But then Rick finally understands, I think, that you can have it both ways. Different people, different situations. His default mode is good guy Rick.
But you got to be able to turn.
But the caged beast is what makes Rick the leader that can be all.
The combination on that padlock cannot be too complicated. You got to be able to rip that lock off and need be.
And I think so. Yeah, I think that's what Rick's finally realized is that by using both of his, he's has this duality, but by using each correctly, and maybe if he sets up some fail safes, like I trust you. Well, like Michonne, I trust you, Michonne. Tell me when I am, when I'm letting things cloud my judgment.
Because Michonne and Daryl are on the same page in a lot of things, but they're not in sync.
Mm-hmm.
So if both of those people are looking at Rick and going, "You're wrong,"
right.
You're probably wrong.
Right. They're not attached at the hip.
They ain't BFFs.
Yeah.
So that actually, Rick does need to dispense with the BS.
Yeah.
He needs to progress.
So if they relapse Rick again into self-doubt, I think that is a mistake.
That's hamster wheel.
That's hamster wheeling it, and that's why I think with the Carl plot, if they end up going with Carl getting shot and that whole thing, that'll give Rick some moment to pause, but not in anything of himself. It's just like, holy cow, I've been kind of driving myself on protecting Carl. What if I lose him? Now what do I drive myself? Exactly. That sort of thing.
That's an actual identity crisis. That's not kind of like just a cheap one they threw. Which actually, speaking of identity crises and doubts, we need to have a convo between Maggie and Daryl sooner than later, ASAP. Because let's be honest, what else are they going to talk about in that boxcar?
Right.
Besides, because that's the thing. Rick is
so Beth didn't make it out. Daryl's not one to be like, yeah, oh no, you're right. Yeah, the prison got bopped. It was bad.
You just see Rick slowly look at Daryl with narrow eyes, okay, I'm now worried and intrigued. Why are you lying to her?
Right.
Because no, it's Daryl. Because I honestly, I really loved the words that Daryl chose to say when explaining to Rick. No, she's not necessarily dead. She's just gone.
Right.
And the way he said it basically says, I don't know.
Right.
He can say it without having to say it.
That's true, yeah. Rick doesn't prod any further past that.
Well, because Rick knows Daryl. Rick's like, hey,
man, this is a guy that rolled down a mountain and impaled himself on his own arrow to save Sophia. Clearly if he quit looking when he says that she's gone, she's gone.
Yeah. Which, I wonder if she'll ever come back. I wonder if she'll ever appear again.
They were making her a little bit more likable. I wouldn't miss her, but you know, it is a shame they got rid of her right.
I
want
to see her reaction.
Substance to her.
Exactly. I want to see her reaction to. I want to see Daryl, that dynamic. Because trust me, Beth is all in for hooking up with Daryl.
Right.
And Daryl started to be really mosey to the idea. What the hell do you think?
I feel like you're reading a lot into that, Mike. I feel like they had like one meal and he maybe like looked at her and like winked once.
No. You know Beth was into that.
Oh, yeah. Duh. But
and
I mean,
Daryl. Well,
I don't think Daryl was quite there yet.
No, he wasn't. That's what I'm saying. He's just like them being isolated together,
right.
And him getting his emotions out there.
Right.
For a man who's been suppressing his emotions the entire existence of this crap,
Right.
that's powerful. So there was a trickle. There was a drop.
That's a better word. That's not.
Well, no, he's just that wheel is just starting to get turning. I think Maggie puts her boot down immediately and says, "No."
Not till she's 18.
I mean,
state law of Georgia, that doesn't exist.
At least, like, come on, Daryl. No.
Mike, you're reading into it. I don't think Daryl was
Daryl's
nearly
like,
there yet.
well, no,
bro.
that's like, then Daryl looks at Maggie. He's like, "I'm not doing it." And Beth's like, "Why can't I?" Maggie's like, "Are you retarded?" You go from there. Go on, tell me you don't. You
this is what you want to see, Mike. You want Walking Dead to turn into a soap opera?
No. I'm curious to see if they'll pull that angle. I don't think they would, just because I can see them pulling back a broken Beth, and that causing an entirely different.
And honestly, if they bring Beth back, this might be a long shot. If they bring Beth back and they end up,
Oh, you think
together,
she'll be action girl?
No, I think if Daryl ended up with Beth, I think it'd be more of a Carol issue. Like Carol comes back, Daryl, I thought you were dead.
Oh no! Oh yeah,
Carol wanted those nuts, dude.
Yeah. Well, then can you blame her?
She wanted those chestnuts on an open fire, bro. Hot and raring and ready to go.
Jack Frost nipping at.
I don't know that was, I don't know what that reference.
Although
was.
it's been said,
I don't think it made many
times.
In many ways.
Carol wants Daryl. In the worst way.
Carol wants a Daryl Berry blast. Is what Carol wants
man,
right
we can run with that one, but we're gonna drop it.
So yeah, I agree though. Maggie and Daryl, that's such a weak plot to hype up.
No, I said just get it over.
The fact that I
don't
don't really care if Beth comes back or not shows that if they dwell on Beth, that's a mistake.
Exactly. Like, it can't be a lingering
Do
problem.
not turn Beth into Sophia.
No. And you know what, honestly?
Where the whole season is just them, like, what do we do?
Well, that's why Beth coming back, like, Beth popping into the story, having been taken and used as and granted, this is not something I want, per se, but a sex slave survivor adds a whole another layer of complexity and depth. A real, and in many cases in this world, a real problem. Example. Because you want to see Maggie cave, you want to see Daryl cave, that's the way to do it. Mm-hmm. You bring her back. Because then there's guilt everywhere. Guilt, Buzz Lightyear, guilt right. Everywhere.
Right.
So, and then also blame. You tell me Maggie doesn't immediately point a finger right in Daryl's face and say, "This is your fault."
Right.
How could you're Daryl. How could you let this happen? And Daryl isn't going to respond angrily.
Right. He probably won't say much.
He's just going to...
just do the shoulder. Yeah. I agree.
He's just going to retreat inward.
Right.
Compelling. But we'll see.
Mike, you want a soap opera. You're a loser. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Now... on today's Walking
I wish
Dead.
I knew. I wish I knew the days of our lives.
What would the Walking Dead soap opera theme song go like?
Viewers, get on it.
It's just like Rick looks over his shoulder, right? As like Carl gets shot in the background.
Rick, Carl's been shot. Dum dum. Just like like a Joey Tribbiani, like
to be continued. Yeah.
Looks all serious. Like, oh, that'd be great.
Oh, man, what if Matt LeBlanc was Jesus, dude? Matt LeBlanc for Jesus! Let's start that. Let's get that going on the interwebs.
I can't.
You're right, it makes no sense.
That wouldn't work.
I don't know.
I mean...
It's better than Matthew Perry as Jesus. Can we agree on that?
Matthew Perry shouldn't be in anything
ever At least
again.
Matt LeBlanc has, like, that charm.
At least Matt LeBlanc looks like he could kick somebody's butt.
Right, right.
Although I
was going to say, I don't know, between Courtney Cox and
yeah,
and why did I just forget his name? Matthew Perry. I don't know who wins in that fist fight. I'm sorry, Matthew Perry, but I don't. My money's not on it.
Courtney Cox looks scrappier. Let's
right?
be honest.
She's got some fire in those eyes.
She got that crazy eyes. Like she gonna go.
Right. She'd probably flying people's elbow him right in the dome.
Or spike heel roundhouse kick. Like, you look at her and go, you just spun on... Wow. All right.
So, if you guys can't not tell, yeah, we have nothing left to talk about.
We're out.
So that's our Walking Dead spiel. Let us know what you guys think in the comments about, our what we're hoping to see. Is it dumb? Is it likely? Is it unlikely? Did we miss something?
Share,
Do
subscribe.
you actually know the characters' names so you know more about the comics than we do and you can help us out? Let us know in the comments. Let us know what you want us to talk about. We're lining some things up for next week that won't be TV related, but let us know if you guys like this. We'll probably come back with something related with Game of Thrones either way. Because how could you not?
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming, fam.
Actually, summer is coming.
Yeah, right. 100 plus degrees for 8 straight months is what's coming. But thank you guys for tuning in and listening, and we hope to see you again. Well, I don't know. We don't see him, but we hope to have you hear us again soon. Does that make sense?
You know what? I can't make an anonymous reference. Expect us.
Right.
Yeah, okay. But anyways, so yeah. Hasta la vista.
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got the real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam. Get your chance, do your dance at the Space Jam.